Welcome to the New Media Show, where each Wednesday at 3 p.m. Eastern, UTC+4, Todd Cochrane and Greenlee take their over 30 combined years of leadership in the podcasting space to discuss, dissect, and deconstruct the current podcasting news, forecasts, trends, and predictions. Now here are your hosts, Academy of Podcasting Hall of Famers, Todd Cochrane and Greenlee.
And here we are. We're back with the New Media Show. I am back from 45 hours of round trip travel to the Philippines and back.
And I didn't.
and poor Chris from Podfest, he had major delays. He arrived 6 a.m. the morning before the event, after having missed a flight and got rerouted over God knows where. And at the end of the day of the event, he was like a stick of pork in him. You could tell he was a little punchy. But this is why when you travel international, you leave at least a minimum of 1 day early. Because
yeah, that helps.
It's
right?
like if you're going from Detroit to LA, there's 4 flights that day. But if you're going from LA to the Philippines, there's one.
Right. You have one shot.
1 or 2, maybe,
right.
know, and you want to get rerouted, good luck. And
it sounds like the old days when there was a lot of flights flying everywhere. There's been a lot of trimming of flights.
Yeah, I was in Chicago and had a 3.5 layover. We got on the airplane and got delayed because of weather. And I'm watching my watch, and about 2 hours, I'm like, uh-oh. My 3-hour window went to an hour. So when we landed in San Francisco, I basically had enough time to go to the bathroom, refill my water jug, and board. So, yeah, I had a tight connection. So, yeah, it's just, you never know. This time it's not snow, it's lightning. But anyway, got in early and enjoyed having a local vivation, a San Miguel, and San Miguel Light, and Tandale rum. And, yeah, it was fantastic.
All right, and then you're off to London here.
Yeah, Saturday.
Later this week. Yeah.
So I tell you, Rob, it's a repeat of kind of what I learned in Saudi, but here's really the skinny.
Oh, of Asia?
Yeah, in Asia.
With podcasts?
There was, how do I say this nicely? They are in love and bow and walk and spread petals on the ground for Spotify.
Yeah, I think it makes sense to some degree, the more I think about it.
And Ted and Apple, you guys need to listen. You need to listen. You have
get on Android.
you have given up that market.
Right.
Because 90% of the people that were in the room had Android.
They don't have
device.
Apple.
Yeah. And I basically asked why, and basically they said that the reason that Apple gets no love is because they do nothing for the community. But then again, I asked, well, what does Spotify do for you? And are they putting money in your pocket? What's the and it really isn't. It's just a lot of moral support.
Well, that and plus they're probably seen as much more visible in those markets because of Android.
Yeah, because of Android. Absolutely. So Google, again, because they don't have a native podcast app, Spotify wins by default. And
Todd, let's actually dive into that a little bit, because what if Apple did have an app? Are people even inclined in those markets to even think of Apple over Spotify in those markets right now?
Well, because Apple is like, they don't see any exposure. besides
I'm
besides the emails that Apple gives. So I would assume that and I didn't load my app store while I was there. I didn't load the podcast app to see if there was a curated Filipino podcast list or not. And maybe someone over there at Apple that's listening can send me an email and say, do you guys do curated lists for each of those countries? I thought they did, but I mean, it was pretty evident. But besides that, and the feedback, well, basically, they had a lot of presenters, and they had a group up there that were talking about networks, and it was a really good panel. I mean, it was like something I would hear here in the United States, but they kept dodging around the money, and from an advertising standpoint. So, me being me, when they got done, I got them cornered, and I'm like, "Hey, what's the big secret about money?" And they said, "Oh, there's no secret." I'm like, "Well, you would never respond what the CPMs were, and what it is there is no local advertising. In other words, Philippines companies are not advertising in podcasts. The advertising that they're getting in podcasts are from national companies, and they're working with, and I'm not going to say the hosting provider, but they're working with a certain well-known hosting provider that are providing ads for their network. So the networks are actually not on Spotify. They're on another network, and the network is feeding them global advertising. So, and they're getting CPMs that you would expect here, $25 CPMs. But that again is for that top tier of shows. And
so you're saying that they aren't hosting on Spotify; they're hosting on another platform.
Yeah, they're hosting another platform
or regional.
Yeah,
to them.
And this is for those that are in a part of a network. And there is some investment going on in show development. I could never get them pinned down what that type of number looked like from a dollar standpoint. But overall, probably around 200, 225 total attendance. There was probably 30 to 40 VA. There was a lot of editors there, a lot of people that were involved in doing editing. In other words, they were editing other shows, U.S., UK, Australian-based shows. So there was a lot of those people there. So those were some interesting conversations, because an opportunity to get them to help. I basically said, listen, you look at what we have over here. It was a pretty good day. Now, be honest with you, the Chris had hooked up with matter of fact, a good friend of mine. It's in Cincinnati. Her name is Aya, and it turns out that Aya's brother is a big muckety muck in the quote unquote true media business in the Philippines, Sunstar. And I think I'm gonna, if I pronounce it, and if I got it wrong, I've done it twice. I better make sure I'm saying the right company name. So her brother was actually, let me go here. Come on, let me load this. Come on. Website. Why are we not loading? It'll get it here. And then, but there was a Philippine senator that came. Now, if you think about American politics, we have 50 senators. In the Philippines, there's only 12. And one of, Sunstar's the company, and the MGS Global Group. So this Philippine senator came in, and her and I got to talk for probably an hour, kind of off the side, had a great conversation. But it was like the water spread, when she walked in the building, that was like the locals there were all getting around her, getting selfies. It was just like a major celebrity showing up to an event. And very well, I had a really good conversation with her, and just talking about, what we can do for media and having voices heard in the Philippines. She's a big women's advocate for healthcare and a variety of topics that are a little bit controversial in the Philippines. She's on I guess you would say she's on the liberal slant in the country, part of the minority legislature, but she's been big advocate for women for many years, and she has some great stories. And I was just like, you could be the catalyst to help some of these stories come out that need to be told. High amount of single women with in the Philippines with children. Just these types of healthcare issues, the whole 9 yards, is things that could be fabulous for a podcast series to be talked about to, help these voices to be heard. So we had a good discussion about that. This event was held. Now, if anyone is ever traveling in the Philippines, if you're looking for a co-working location, KMC is the name of the co-working location. I walked in this place and I was like, am I in New York City? I mean, it was beautiful, beautiful facility, ping pong table in the back, water, just a whole 9 yards, in private working groups. Matter of fact, one of the co-working locations, I saw Johnson & Johnson in the back left-hand corner of the building. So there was companies that had co-working spaces in there. Great venue, and they're all over the Philippines. So if anyone's ever going to the Philippines and needs a co-working space, KMC is the way to go. And then Podcast Network Asia, with Ron and his team. So it was, I was duly impressed. They did a good job for an inaugural event.
So what did you pick up around what the activity level is of podcasting in that market? And where would you position it in the context of the United States? Are they like 5 years behind, do you think? Or are
No.
they a couple of years behind? Or
I don't think
where are they in the ecosystem of what we've seen happen here in the United States around podcasting?
I don't think they're anywhere behind.
Oh, you don't? Okay.
From a messaging, knowledge, information standpoint, the words coming out of the local Filipinos dialogue is what I would expect to hear at a U.S. conference.
Okay.
So the knowledge level, at least at that level, to me sounded, there was nothing. I didn't shake my head. For me, I could be at U.S. conference. I'm like, oh no. And then there was, I heard none of that.
Mm-hmm.
There was no super hyping. There was no, everyone was very humble. No, there was no, and people were, notebooks were out. People were scribbling, and very attentive audience, and listening and taking notes and asking fabulous questions, not dumb questions. I mean, asking fabulous questions, like something. I was actually surprised. I didn't hear because sometimes people ask a question at an event, you're kind of like, oh, really? But there was high level questions being asked. So no, and here's the thing too. The whole country speaks English.
Mm-hmm.
So there is no, what's the best way to describe it? There's no language barrier. So they're listening to all these podcasts. They're listening. Matter of fact, a couple of people came and say, hey, we listen to your podcast. We don't like it so much. You and Rob fight, but and I'm like, we don't fight. We just jostle. So there's people that are there that were listening to the show, this show.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was pretty blown away. And to be honest with you, I think there's opportunities there.
But you had mentioned that you didn't get a sense that the kind of monetization had reached the same level of where we're at here, or is it just the economy? Or what do you attribute that to?
Well, the advertising piece is, for those that are monetized, I think they're monetized to about the same level as we are here in the United States. There was a little hemming and hawing a little bit, so maybe inventory is not as high.
Yeah.
But, during my presentation, I talked about, hey, listen, it's, the money's not everything. I talked about value for value. Yeah. I talked about, a strategy that they should be looking at.
Mhm. Mhm.
So my approach to talking about video, because video is big there. My approach to talking about there was regular podcasters there that had been in the biz for a long time that were
Mhm.
from outside of the Philippines that had come in to speak that did not know Apple Podcasts supported video podcasts. They did not know. I had a slide up that showed
Right.
my show on Apple Podcasts playing and the people were coming. That's possible. They had so
Yeah.
so it was that kind of a thing, and and I basically went back to the strategy of that we have to have there has to be it's just simple. We don't care whether they listen as long as they listen or watch.
Mhm.
And as long as they adapt that, but they shouldn't adapt one over the other. There should be a, you should consider both. But most of the folks there were not. Actually, the folks I talked to that were doing media were mostly audio. And they felt like they were being forced to do video and were kind of hesitant to do video, which
Mhm.
was curious.
Mhm.
But it was not creator heavy. It was network leaders, it was VAs, it was industry people. So I didn't get
Mhm.
to talk to a lot of actual one-on-ones with creators.
With podcasters. Okay.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
it was all upper echelon folks that were there. And I am hoping that if this comes to be a repeat in the following year, that they're able to bring in more creators. And I think, to be honest with you, is there's going to have to be some sponsorship of creators coming to the event because the cost of the event was definitely very high from someone that would be a hobbyist that would not be making any money from their show, someone that's creating it for passion, for them to
Mhm.
come. And I also was too, as I was like, okay, how is Blueberry's price point from a hosting standpoint? Would you, based on our features, pay the amount that we charge for hosting over using Spotify for free? And almost to a person, they said we would use Blueberry. The pricing didn't scare them because they were understanding the value of open RSS, the value of building your brand. They really believe in that more. I was pretty shocked. They're like, everyone has their own website for their own shows. There was nary a
Mhm.
person I talked to that was just sitting over on Spotify with a show.
Mhm.
So, but it is curious, um, the love affair that people have with Spotify. It was very, very evident. They didn't want to talk to Todd. They wanted to, talk to the Spotify guy. So, which is, it's fine.
Was Spotify there?
Yeah. And one of the Spotify reps was there. Yeah. He came in
Okay.
from Singapore.
Oh, okay.
So,
Okay.
but
Yeah.
again, their team did good. Ron and his partner, running, not partner, but is not his physical partner, but his business partner, um, did a great job in hosting
Yeah. So we've seen, I think over the
and
last
Pod
week,
Machine.
we've heard, right. I think we've heard that Apple is maybe in some of the surveys or the data, at least that came out of Buzzsprout, I believe, was showing that Apple has now lost the lead. I I'm not sure why that is, but that's been kind of the trend with Buzzsprout anyway for a while now, that Apple has kind of lost that lead to Spotify. I don't know, Todd, if you've seen the numbers in your platform.
Yeah, I'm
um,
pulling them up right now. Of course,
is is Spotify gaining on
not
Apple's
for us.
market
No.
share?
Matter of fact, Spotify for us is okay. So we're at 53.48 for Apple.
Hmm.
Believe it or not, Chrome, mobile, and desktop is 11%, which is nuts. Apple Other, which would be Apple Core Media, 634. Other Android apps 4.25, Overcast 2.36, Podcast Addict 2.29, Castbox 2.07, Spotify iOS/Android for us is 1.95%. That's a 337 million sample. But again, it goes back to what are my top categories? Business, education, news, religion, and tech. Those are my top 5 customer categories. Those are not categories that are doing well on Spotify, just from a consumption standpoint.
Does that concern you at all, Todd?
No, it doesn't, because I think Buzzsprout should publish their top 5 categories of customers, and then we could see if there's a split. I attest this low number for us with Spotify because of the type of content. We have a huge number of religious shows, huge. So I don't think they would be consumed on Spotify. I don't think people that are on Spotify are listen to a Christian podcast or a Muslim podcast or whatever it may be.
Okay, so you think that distinction between the numbers between Buzzsprout and Blueberry are based on the type of content and maybe the content creators?
I think
who they are, right?
I think so. That's my hypothesis. Because if I look at the business alone, then that number jumps back up. We're at 5-6% for business alone. Education 4.5, 5. But when religion is essentially 0 on Spotify, then that just sucks the average way down. Education almost 0 sucks the other categories that are a little higher, pulls the life out of it.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to know for a fact on an industry-wide basis how Spotify stacks up against Apple. Not so much based on data that's coming off of one hosting platform, which is, I think, what we're primarily doing right now is looking at real data from like Buzzsprout or Libsyn, or because I think even Libsyn has been showing an increase in consumption from Spotify. Right.
And I think they're 8, 9, 10% or something like that. So,
yeah.
But again, our top countries, the United States has fell below 50% of all of our listening groups. So, which is interesting itself. You think
as far as countries
go. So you would think that would drive the Spotify numbers up because of us having less than half of our listeners are coming out of the United States.
Yeah.
UK makes up about 6, Canada 5.5, and then we got this weird outlier in Nigeria, which is because of specifically 2 shows that have literally 20 million listeners in Nigeria or whatever the number is, totally every month.
So as we look at what we're seeing here, it points to a couple of things for me anyway, just kind of big picture, and it may not be as big of an issue as maybe it may seem, but Apple may be losing some momentum in the market to some degree, really kind of maybe based on their decisions or lack of choices to move forward on, like maybe they're behind the curve on exposing the availability of video podcasts on their platform. I mean, they took that, and I think we talked about it in the last episode too, but they took that ability to see those actually in the navigation.
And hence the shock by people that are in the mainstream were shocked that, you can do video on Apple?
Yeah. No, I mean, it's the same reaction I see all the time when I talk about it too.
Yeah.
It's just like, well, you can watch video in the Apple Podcast app. It's like,
right.
But that's been there all along. But the problem is Apple has suppressed it.
Yeah.
And that has had an impact on the market. I don't know if Apple really wants that impact, especially now, to be there. And are they willing to make a change here? It's not a huge change for them to pull up the ability to throttle back and forth between seeing the video that's in there and seeing the audio that's in there.
If they want to compete with Spotify outside of the United States, though, especially in the Arab world and in Asia, they need to have an app on
Android.
and Android.
Right.
They have to.
But Todd, but my bigger question even on that is it too late?
Maybe, because, when they get an Android phone now, because I said, did you have to install Spotify, or was it come pre-installed on your Android device? Oh, it's pre-installed. And of course, they're not all carrying Android devices. And here's another thing that Spotify and Facebook do is, okay, so here in the United States, we're all on a data plan, right?
Right.
We pay, whatever exorbitant fee we pay every month.
Flat rate.
Yep.
It's a flat rate. Right.
There, it's load. So, okay, so anyone that's in like the rural area, they have something called peso Wi-Fi. So for like 5 pesos, they get 12 hours of Wi-Fi access, and they're on Wi-Fi. If they're on a data plan, they have to buy what's called load. I think nearly every data plan there, you actually buy your data. So,
right. So let's be clear on that. So they're buying a SIM card with data that's associated with, or they're renewing the data that they have. It's like in a block amount, right?
They have a cell phone with a telephone number, and in order to get data, they have to buy a block of data. And it's either based on time or amount of data.
Yeah, it's like 5 gigabytes
it's like,
or 10 or
so
something like that.
So you can buy in increments of $1 up to like $10 worth of data.
So for $10, how much
that probably
data
would probably get you 2 or 3 weeks worth of data,
which would be like 5 gigabytes or
again, there's all kinds of different plans, and these, they're very, very smart about shopping. But Spotify and Facebook in many of these countries pay for the data.
So what does that mean?
So
they pay for the data.
So they're the 2 major providers in the Philippines is Globe and Smart. And so my assumption is that Facebook and Spotify pays Globe and Smart for any data that's going through their network to someone that's using the app. So someone doesn't have to have a load to be on Facebook. They're
subsidizing it based on the traffic to their platforms.
They don't have to pay for the data. So if you're someone that is paying by the gigabyte and you have an app that is making data free, of course you're going to use that app.
Right.
Of course.
That's a great incentive.
Great incentive. Yeah. So, and it runs by periods and the promotions, and it's advertised, and they advertise, hey, use Facebook, your data is free. And I don't think it runs continuously, but it's enough that, guess what, you give someone 3 weeks of free service, and then the last week of the month you have to pay for data. Well, you're going to pay for that data because you want your music, and they're big. One thing about the Philippines is, karaoke goes to 6 o'clock in the morning, and it's not like let's go out and sing for an hour. Oh no, they sing all night. So it's big music culture there, huge. So
do they get that data access even though they don't have a data plan?
That's
or
right.
Is it that they have to have a data plan?
No.
But they don't use up any of their data.
That's right. They don't use any of their data.
Okay, it can't be both, but
right. I don't know if they have to turn on the data to get the free data, but they don't use against their data.
Right. Okay.
Right.
So they have to have a data plan.
I think so.
Paid for, but the data that they use by using Spotify doesn't use up that plan.
And because broadband is not, and this is a whole business infrastructure there. Every small community, every village, every barangay, every block, there's some man or woman that has a little kiosk sticking out of their house like a window air conditioner. They walk up to, they've got fiber to the home and high speed, 300. Yeah, that's what I had for internet when I was in my Airbnb. and put 7 pesos in or whatever, you get 12 hours worth of Wi-Fi. So people don't need Wi-Fi during the day. They come home from work at 5, 6 o'clock at night. They want to stream a video or something. They go put 25 cents in the peso Wi-Fi machine, and they got Wi-Fi until they go to sleep. And they have no data plan. They don't buy load.
Mm-hmm. Oh, really? Okay.
Right. So, if you have ready access to Wi-Fi, matter of fact, people turn their data off to try to save their data when they're on Wi-Fi. It's just because they don't have a plan where you're just connected and hooked and you can rock and roll. So if a company was smart, Apple, you would have an Android app. And you
then
would
do a subsidized usage plan like this. Right.
But that's not the game. And of course, Apple's not monetizing the content. They're not monetizing advertising on podcasts. Where Spotify there's ads running continuously.
Well, the only explanation I can think of that they haven't done this would be that they're not selling enough hardware devices in those countries to
maybe
to think that there's worth an
well,
investment.
and it's also the podcast section besides premium podcasts is not monetized, whereas on Spotify it is.
Mm-hmm.
There's advertising being run. So Spotify supplements by earning advertising dollars against that content that the podcaster earns zero on.
So would you say that the takeaway from what we're talking about here is that Apple may be falling behind in the market?
Outside the U.S., absolutely.
So that may explain why they're losing market share.
Absolutely, unequivocally. Now, if you were in Singapore, it's a different economic situation. People can afford iPhones.
Right.
The iPhones I did see you didn't see an i15 Pro Max. You saw the base
the lower expensive,
base model,
lesser.
Because, I was just looking at the back of the phones, the
Mm-hmm.
difference between 3 cameras and 2.
Mm-hmm.
And I just, it's just kind of this thing I watch for. And again, this crowd that we were in was, definitely on a higher income scale. So there was a number of folks that had higher end phones, like a Samsung Galaxy S24. And, you
Mm-hmm.
saw some higher end phones. But again, you can buy a Android phone on any street corner in any part of the country for, literally $20. So,
well, did you see any KaiOS phones over there?
I wasn't looking for those specifically.
I mean, you didn't come across anybody that had one.
No.
Okay.
So, I again, yeah, it's Spotify is owned in Asia wholeheartedly. And matter of fact, I tasked my team to, try to post some numbers. Our Asia mark, we don't have a big presence in Asia yet.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Said, let's try to see where this, what the delta looks on Spotify. But another thing too, a lot of people, that are on podcasts are on Spotify in Asia are not with a host that has pass-through. So their content is cached.
Mm-hmm.
So therein lies another, basically Spotify caches the media. So they're not getting, they're getting Spotify stats, but that stats are not backing into the host or wherever that media is coming from.
So Todd, I wanted to also talk about today on the show, and I did kind of tease it in the artwork that I put up for this episode, which is, I'm sure that you'll remember, and you'll probably be, I don't know if it's amused or just interested in the trajectory of ad revenue in the podcast industry and market, right? I know it went down, but I'm talking about, I'm trying to back up and get a historical view on this.
Yeah.
Because what we've seen over, I would say, the last 5 or 6 years is a lot of projections from various media survey companies saying that podcast revenue is going to be this
$5
by
billion
this date,
or whatever. Yeah.
6 billion by 2022, 5 billion by 2023.
Uh-huh.
And every year that goes by, we barely even get to 2 billion. And
1.97, I think the number was, right?
And that's come out this week in Pod News. The U.S. podcast ad revenue is growing 5% in 2023, but I guess it only grew in the large companies, Todd.
Oh.
So that's kind of the slowdown is in the mid-tier companies.
Well, as Adam Curry says, you can't monetize the network.
So I just think it's interesting. And then you look at the widely expected. So podcast industry is right at like just a little under 2 billion, which they've been projecting that we'd be over 2 billion for probably the last 5 years.
Time.
Right.
Yeah.
So
matter of fact, that we went above 2 billion and then we went below 2 billion, didn't we? Didn't we go up and then back down?
I've never seen any real confirmation that we ever went over 2 billion.
Right,
I don't know about you, but maybe we have. I don't know for sure. But all I keep seeing is these optimistic projections every year that, it's going on right now too. It says, they missed the widely expected $2 billion figure.
I thought it was supposed to be 5 billion.
Well, see, that's kind of what I'm trying to say here, Todd, is that there's been a lot of hype and a lot of projection about how big the podcast advertising market can become. And the IEB actually put out some predictions this past week, forecasting that it would hit 2.6 billion by 2026.
That's
and then
2 more years.
Yeah, exactly. And it said that the projections for 2023 were 2.2 billion.
Oh.
But that was predicted back in 2021. So we didn't even hit those numbers. And so we're, I think I believe the IEB numbers more than I think it was.
Well, the IEB, what they do is they ask us to report revenue for advertising. And we have to submit that number. You're supposed to tell the truth, the whole truth and nothing but the truth. And matter of fact, if you report too much, then you're, now it's switched to revenue. So it's not necessarily gross revenue. It's not necessarily. So I'm just wondering,
Yeah, I just have to step back on this and look at it from the perspective of all the years that we've been following this, Todd, and really just kind of really honestly say and have a perspective that have we reached peak advertising in podcasting?
Well, I
don't know.
I've said for many years, the only way to 5 billion is you got to monetize the other 40% that wants advertising. It's being ignored.
But Todd, you and I both know that there's headwinds against that.
Absolutely.
Right?
But I look at my inventory of potential that could be monetized. The potential. Let's just take 10% right off the top. They're already monetized. Mm-hmm. And then take that other 40% that want, and I know what that volume is. And there's tens of millions of dollars that are being left on the table every month. Every month.
Well, let's back up and unpack that a little bit and talk about that, why that's happening. I think that there's headwinds coming from, in maybe a limited way from the brand safety and suitability platforms pushing against content.
I don't think that's the issue.
Well, I agree with you, Todd. It's not the core issue. It's one of those headwinds that we're seeing that are kind of holding the medium back.
The issue is the media buyers are lazy.
Well, they don't buy across large numbers of shows.
Right.
They're increasingly only buying, and this data that we saw this week really symbolizes that. That the middle tier companies are not getting the campaigns. It's only the big companies, which means that these ad buyers are only buying into shows that they feel safe in, right? Or they feel that there's a guaranteed ROI.
No, that's not the case. It's
Well, then
it's-
why are they buying from the big companies but not the smaller tier companies?
could it be that their budget is less?
Well, that's yeah,
O-
that
or
is certainly part of it here. And that
or
gets back to the inherent friction that we've been seeing for years.
or they buying names and not show sizes.
Well, that's exactly what I'm talking about. Is
and
these big celebrities
yeah.
podcasts are getting an outsized amount of attention in the ad buying
Well,
community
I
because, like a Conan O'Brien is a perfect example of this, right? And I know I've used him a lot here, but I think he's symbolic of kind of what the headwinds are and what they look like and why we're seeing ad buyers feel safe buying a Conan, but yet, kind of ignore the brand safety issues.
Conan gets a pass.
Well, that's my bigger point
yeah.
that these bigger shows that have well-known celebrities that have brand relationships maybe already and have a history of advertising with these big brands, those are the shows and the personalities that is getting most of the advertising now. So the bigger shows are getting bigger.
Yeah.
They're getting more support from advertisers. They feel a little bit more immune from this brand safety and suitability stuff.
I think brand safety and suitability has nothing to do with the reason we're not at 5 billion. It may be part of the reason is because media buyers who are 23, 24, 25 years old, usually fresh out of college, they're managing an account. It's been handed down to them by someone that's managed it for the last 2 years, who got their promotion or went to another agency and got a bigger job. And what they have done is they have their core list of RFPs. And when someone comes in with 500 shows to spend $500,000 for the quarter, they lose their minds and they can't take that to their boss because their boss is going to say, who? What show? Who?
Well, pick 5 shows out of that 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 your boss is familiar with, right? And those are the ones that are being bought.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Same thing that's been going on since I walked
for years
into the New York MediaCom offices in 2005, late 2005, and did my presentation and got walked out by my back of my coat, asking never to come back in a Macy's suit. It was actually J.C. Penney's. Never come back in my Macy's suit. Same thing. Cherry picking.
And this is different than broadcast radio. Broadcast radio is still getting big budgets. Why is that? It doesn't logically make sense that broadcast radio would get more support than podcasts.
Oh, they're selling it as radio.
I know, but fewer and fewer people are listening to radio over time, and it's an older demo.
Radio's local too, so a lot of local.
Yeah.
If I listen to local radio, I hear the local car dealers and grocery stores and people having those deals.
So is that the magic solution for podcasting? Is it needs to become more local?
It's impossible. That's another impossible play unless you're Rob Greenlee doing the Boston show. No, it's not, because podcasts are global.
Right.
That's why shows in the Philippines are getting global advertising at the same rates they're getting global advertising here in the United States. Same play, same top 10%. That's it.
Yeah, so that's why we're seeing so much of an emphasis on revenue and advertising in the podcast medium, is because people are thinking that this is going to be just like radio. It's going to be a $16 billion industry. I think I even heard a number from another company that was saying that by 2020 or 2035, it's going to be a $60 billion
I'll take those odds. $1,000 on that it won't. I'll put money on the cash barrel right now. Let's go.
Right.
That's probably inflation. But in reality, what we need to be doing is not worrying about the advertising so much.
Yeah.
We need to be worrying about creators and figuring out alternative ways to earn money if they want to earn money. And again, we're live and lit on new podcast apps. You can boost us today. Send us a little boost with your comments. And, time, talent, or treasure. Rob and I are giving you the time and the talent. We just need your treasure. So.
Right.
Yeah, I think I'm having bandwidth issues here. I'm getting warnings from YouTube.
I think I'm having it too. So
it might be on my end. On my 1 gigabit internet connection, it's supposed to be blazingly fast.
Yeah, I don't always think that they're that reliable.
Yeah.
It does talk about in the post in Pod News here, it talks about comedy, sports, news were the highest genres in revenue. So that's comedy, sports, and news. Now, granted, it was the New York Times that complained about the brand safety stuff that was limiting their revenue.
Well, let me tell you, brand safety does not matter because I sampled the Ben Shapiro show. Normally don't. Made it a goal to listen to like 10 different podcasts on the airplane.
Mm-hmm.
Considering I had like 25 hours sitting in a seat that was, hurt my ass because it was uncomfortable.
Yeah.
How many ads do you think I counted in like just the 30 minutes I could handle listening to Ben Shapiro?
Well, doesn't he mostly do host reads?
Oh yeah. How many do you think?
Probably 4 or 5.
Oh no, like 3 every 10 minutes.
Oh, 3 every 10 minutes. Wow.
A lot preload. I mean, it was like, really? Again? And I'm mashing the button, right? 30 seconds, 30 seconds, 30 seconds. And
so is it a different advertiser every time?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's just, and it's the read was mindless. Short? It was, to me, it was like, you didn't encourage, there was no creativity to it. It was just, and move on. It was just, to me, it was a mindless read. And yet he's got a dozen advertisements in 30 or 40 minutes that I could stand to listen. I'm listening to I'm just sampling. And I'm sampling other top shows. It's the same thing. Horrible ad loads. How are these advertisers making any money? Well, they're not. What it is ego. Mr. 23, 24, 25-year-old media buyer, I can buy Ben Shapiro. Oh my God, you can buy Ben Shapiro. Oh my goodness, sign up. So,
well, that's always been kind of, Todd, what you're talking about, what you're moving into, what you're talking about is really a reflection of the tension in the industry that's always been there. And that is between brand advertisers and direct response advertisers, is that the brand advertisers don't really care about response. What they want to do is just get their name out there.
Well, some of these were promo code.
Some of them were, or all of them were?
Well, I didn't have a score pad.
Sure. I was just curious.
And I was, flipping back and forth between in and dozing out of different shows, but I was listening to a whole bunch, and I did a hard right, I did a hard left, same type of ad load between the two.
Got it.
And they were both news. I guess you'd call Shapiro a news show. And then
kind of.
Yeah. So anyway, I listened to both, and then I was listening. I basically picked some stuff that was the top of the charts. And they were no better. Those shows were, matter of fact, more annoying than the normal shows I listen to that have just a regular, maybe a one load, a pre-roll.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of how Ben actually speaks.
Well, to me, I'm like, how
choppy.
There's no way his advertisers are getting value out of his read. I'd love to see the case study that proved me wrong. I just don't see it. Just because I not